My wife cheated with my best man at our wedding, but I got the last laugh now. She's humiliated by her family. Hey, I'm a 28-year-old guy who was supposed to be in Hawaii right now for my honeymoon with Brenda. My 27-year-old wife Brenda has beautiful brown hair, and I was so excited to spend my life with her. We got married yesterday, which should have been the best day ever, but things went horribly wrong right after we got married. I found out that Brenda had cheated on me with my best man just before we were supposed to say our vows. Can you imagine? We had a big 2-day wedding planned with a bachelor party one day, and the actual wedding the next. The rule was that Brenda and I shouldn't see each other at all during these 2 days until we met at the wedding altar. So here's what happened. We both had our own parties at the same place, but in different areas. The groomsmen and bridesmaids could go back and forth between the two, but Brenda and I were supposed to stay apart. Both parties were really fun. We partied hard, had a lot to drink, and I even passed out at midnight. The next morning I got up, got dressed, and was all set to meet Brenda's parents and go through with the wedding, but then everything just fell apart when I learned about the cheating. It turned what was supposed to be my happiest day into a total nightmare. So after the wedding ceremony, we all went to pick up Brenda's grandparents from the airport, and then we headed back for a big lunch celebration with our friends and family. Everyone was toasting to our happiness, and it seemed like a perfect day up until then, but then things took a turn. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and that's when I overheard a couple of janitors talking. They were gossiping about something shocking. They said they saw the bride, my new wife, making out with my best man in the restroom. One janitor was totally sure he saw Brenda in her wedding dress kissing the best man right there. The other janitor mentioned seeing the best man early in the morning in Brenda's room, and at first he thought it was me, the groom, but obviously it wasn't. I just stood there in the restroom listening to all this, feeling shocked and heartbroken. When I finally stepped out, the janitors were super surprised to see me. They quickly left the area looking really awkward. I looked around to see if there were any cameras in the restroom that could prove this, but there weren't any. However, I noticed a camera in the lobby outside the restroom. Driven by a mix of anger and desperation, I rushed to the room where Brenda had stayed the night before to find out more about what had happened. With the memory of the janitor's gossip still fresh, I spotted a camera outside Brenda's room, hoping it might have captured something. I called our wedding manager. I asked him to get the recordings from both the camera near the restroom and the one outside Brenda's room. He seemed hesitant at first, but after seeing how upset I was, he agreed to help me out. I really didn't want to go back to the lunch where everyone was celebrating, but I also didn't want to make a big scene in front of all our guests, so I went back to the table. Sitting there, couldn't stop watching Brenda and my best man. They were chatting and laughing like nothing had happened. It was like a punch in the gut seeing them so carefree. I felt so alone. The two people who were supposed to be my closest allies on this important day had betrayed me. It seemed like everyone else was having a great time dancing and enjoying themselves. They even tried to get me to join in. Noticing I looked upset and asking if I was okay, I just said I was tired and sat out. Then my best man had the nerve to ask Brenda to dance, and she said yes. Watching them dance together, knowing what I knew was unbearable. If only I hadn't overheard the conversation, I might have been out there dancing too happy and oblivious. But there I was, feeling like my whole world had just flipped upside down. Seeing Brenda and my best man dancing together felt like a punch to the stomach. The more they laughed and moved to the music, the more I couldn't help but imagine what might have happened between them the night before. It was torture, and I was trapped in these horrible thoughts, imagining all the ways they might have betrayed me. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from the wedding manager. He had the recordings. I quickly asked him to meet me in my room, away from the party and the painful sight of Brenda and the best man together. I hurried back to my room, my heart pounding. The wedding manager arrived shortly after with the footage. I thanked him, took the recordings, and asked him to leave. I also told him to let anyone who asked know that I wanted to be alone. He nodded and quietly left the room. I locked the door behind him. My hands were shaking as I prepared to play the recordings. I knew that whatever I saw next could change my life forever. I played the footage from the wedding day, focusing first on the lobby outside the restroom. I watched as my best man entered the men's restroom. One by one, others left, and soon he was alone. It looked like he waited until the restroom was empty, locked the door from inside, and then made a call, probably to Brenda. I braced myself knowing that what I might see next could confirm my worst fears. Seeing Brenda sneak into the restroom and then locked in there with my best man for nearly 10 to 12 minutes shattered me. During that time, other guests tried to use the restroom only to find the door bolted shut. Eventually, the janitor had to come, tried knocking with no answer, and then had to direct others to use a different restroom upstairs. When the janitor finally unlocked the door, Brenda rushed out as if nothing had happened, but to me it was clear what had transpired. I was heartbroken, tears streaming down my face as the truth of their betrayal hit me, driven by a need to know everything. I played the footage from the night before. It confirmed my worst fears. It wasn't just a momentary lapse, they had planned it. I watched them making out in the lobby on their way to her room, his hands all over her. The thought of what likely continued inside her room overwhelmed me, and I broke down. Completely alone in my room, I cried uncontrollably, mourning the loss of the two most important relationships in my life on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Meanwhile, my door echoed with knocks and my phone blared with endless texts and calls, but I couldn't face anyone. I just stood there crying and cursing my fate, completely devastated. After sending the event manager to ask everyone to give me some space, the knocking finally stopped, but Brenda wouldn't stop. She kept texting me, trying to check on me. Overwhelmed and unable to deal with it anymore, I switched off my phone to get a moment of peace. However, I couldn't stay put for long. Restlessness got the better of me, and I stormed out of my room, desperate for some fresh air and a change of scenery. When I stepped outside, I noticed that most of the guests had already left. Only a few family members remained, our parents, siblings, and some close friends. The best man had disappeared too. Brenda was there crying, surrounded by her maid of honor and her parents, who were trying to console her. As I approached, everyone turned their attention towards me. My mom came up to me full of concern, asking what had happened. Brenda, however, stayed back, likely knowing what was coming next. I couldn't hold back any longer. In a moment of raw emotion, I looked straight at Brenda and said sarcastically, "I'm really enjoying the marriage right now." Her tears intensified, and as the questions started flying from everyone around, I turned my phone back on. Taking a deep breath, I showed her father the footage of Brenda making out in the lobby with the best man. The shock and disgust on his face said it all. It was clear to everyone what had happened. Without another word, I got in my car and drove away from the venue, leaving behind the chaos and the shattered pieces of what was supposed to be my new life. The event manager called me for the final settlement, and I asked him to take it from the bride putting up a show at the venue. I don't know who paid the settlement and what happened afterwards, because I haven't spoken to anyone since leaving the place. I drove off more than 200 miles to a remote countryside, and I've been staying here since. Yesterday afternoon, I left the venue in my wedding suit, so on the way I got rid of it and changed into my gym clothes, lying on the trunk. My condition is just so pathetic. I haven't spoken to anyone. The last meal I had was my wedding lunch. I wanted to visit the pastor for the annulment process, but just don't have any motivation to move my butt. We had our flight to Hawaii this morning, and in the middle of all this chaos, I forgot to cancel it. In fact, I woke up today with the final calls from airlines to board the flight. That money went to waste. I canceled the hotel bookings but got no returns because I was canceling them post-check-in time. I got some money back only for the return flight from Hawaii and some water sports bookings. Otherwise, I lost everything in the true sense. Anyway, monetary loss is nothing compared to the mental stress that I'm going through. I don't know how I'm going to deal with all this trauma. My head is hurting so bad. This loneliness is killing me, but I don't want to talk or meet with anyone. I don't know how to explain my situation. You don't have to explain your situation. She just did the most incredibly terrible thing to you. Now for the updates. Update 1. Hey there, thanks for sticking with me while I share my pretty tough story. Things have been really rough. I'm still feeling down, but I'm a bit better than when I first ran away to a random place last week. I ended up at a cheap motel next to the highway where lots of truck drivers and people on road trips stop for the night. I didn't really care about where I was staying. I just needed to get away from everything that was familiar. A couple of days after I arrived, I realized I needed to grab some basic stuff and maybe get some food because I hadn't eaten properly. The motel had a little supermarket downstairs, so I went there. By then, I smelled pretty bad because I'd been drinking a lot and hadn't showered. After I cleaned up, I decided it was time to sort out the mess with the wedding. I went to see the pastor who married us. He was really shocked when I told him what went down. After the ceremony, I told him straight up that I wanted to act like the wedding never happened. I didn't really know the rules about getting a marriage annulled, The pastor explained that an annulment is a way to cancel a marriage like it never existed, but it's only allowed in specific situations like if there was fraud, if someone was forced into it, or if the vows were made without really understanding them because someone was drunk or high. I brought up the idea to the pastor that maybe my situation could count as fraud since she cheated right before we set our vows, but it turned out things were a bit more complicated because we had officially registered our marriage at the magistrate's office. Following all the legal steps that meant an annulment wasn't possible and I'd have to go through the divorce process. Instead, this also meant I'd inevitably have to deal with her again, which I was dreading. Left with no other choice, I went to my parents' place to figure things out. They were really worried about me. My dad, being incredibly supportive, offered to help in any way he could, knowing he had lots of connections. I asked if he could hook me up with a lawyer. Lucky for me, Dad is a businessman and knows a few good attorneys. He gave me the contact of a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases. It turned out my dad had already talked to him about my situation, so the lawyer was all prepped and ready to help. Dad reassured me that everything was set for a quick and straightforward divorce because the marriage hadn't been consummated. I met with the lawyer and he was super confident about handling everything smoothly. He started on the paperwork right away and told me the divorce papers would be sent to her within a week. He also made it clear that he'd make sure I wouldn't have to pay any alimony. In fact, he was going to argue that she should pay for half of the wedding costs. When the whole wedding debacle unfolded, my dad stepped in to handle the financials since I had paid for the entire wedding myself. That's why my lawyer is pushing to get half of those expenses back from Brenda as part of the divorce settlement. It turns out that after I left the venue, my dad also took care of the payment to the wedding planner. The situation with Brenda escalated quickly. Her parents were so upset by her actions that they left the venue immediately, essentially disowning her on the spot. Her maid of honor ended up taking her home. Meanwhile, my family, including my parents and grandparents, were left to pick up my belongings and finalize everything with a planner. When everything settled down a bit, my mom handed me the keys to my house, which Brenda had sent to my parents' house. Brenda also called my mom apologizing for everything and asking for help to reconcile with me. However, my mom told her she wouldn't interfere and that it would be up to me to decide the future of our relationship. As for questions about my best man, well, he's been my buddy since college and we've been close for about 10 years. He moved to Seattle after we graduated, but we've kept in touch, and whenever he's back in town, we hang out like old times. He was even more excited about my wedding than I was. It's hard to imagine how everything turned so sour considering our long history and the excitement leading up to the big day. He came down a week before the wedding to help me out with shopping and other preparations. He's always been more like family than just a friend. This wasn't the first time he had met Brenda. They hung out with me numerous times before whenever he visited. Honestly, I've been struggling to understand what he was thinking when he betrayed me right before the wedding. At that time, though, all I really wanted was to find some peace of mind. Brenda and I had been together for 2 years, and even after deciding to get married, we waited another 5 months. During all those years, I never saw any warning signs. He was always nice and respectful, never inappropriate with any of my friends. Even when he was the best man, nothing seemed off until everything fell apart. I returned to my now empty house, which felt haunted by memories. The last time I was here, we were so excited, planning our wedding and dreaming about our future. Now everything was shattered. The next day, my mom came over and stayed with me for the next few weeks. She took care of everything Brenda had left behind and even helped renovate the place a bit. Her presence was a huge comfort during such a tough time. Clearing out the house and sorting through everything was a big help, and it gradually helped me start to feel like I was getting back in control of my life. The first proactive step I took was joining the fitness club. I figured it was better to drain all those swirling negative thoughts through intense workouts rather than let them consume me. I wasn't really out of shape before, but I was a bit chubby since starting my workouts. I've already lost 5 pounds, which feels great. Keeping busy has been crucial for me. When the divorce papers finally reached her, Brenda texted me asking if we could meet. It was the first time I had heard from her since the wedding day disaster. Her message broke me down all over again. I had been ignoring her, trying to act as if she didn't exist, like she was a ghost. But her text made all the emotions come flooding back. Despite everything, I agreed to meet her. She looked frail and tired during our meeting. I kept my expression neutral, answering her questions with short one-word responses. The conversation felt incredibly awkward. I don't even know what came over me, but I ended up bringing up the cheating bluntly asking her how she ended up with him. It was a question that had been haunting me, and somehow in that moment I just needed to ask. Hearing Brenda's response was tough. She was clearly ashamed and broke down as she explained. She told me she had never cheated on me before and had never planned to. She wanted to stay loyal to me for life, but she explained when she shared her commitment fears with her bridesmaids. They shockingly suggested that she should have one last fling before committing to marriage at her bachelorette party. Her friends apparently told my best man that Brenda was looking for a final hookup before tying the knot. He responded casually, saying he was available, thinking it was all just playful banter, but that just set off something more serious between them. They started flirting initially as part of the game in front of everyone else at the party. However, once they were alone, they couldn't stop themselves. Brenda told me that what was meant to be a bit of fun spiraled into them spending the night together. It happened while I was out cold from my own bachelor party. I had gone to bed early since I needed to wake up to pick up my grandparents from the airport. Meanwhile, my best man, not yet ready to call it a night, went over to the bachelorette party. What started as a game turned into a full-blown betrayal. This revelation was a lot to process, making the C2 situation even more painful and complicated. Brenda's confession and the unfolding of events left me questioning many things, even wondering if I should blame myself for having gone to bed early that night. But deep down, I knew that wasn't really the issue. After she finished explaining, Brenda looked at me with such sadness and asked if there was any chance we could try again to start over. I couldn't. I told her no, I could never trust her again, and without trust, there's no foundation for a relationship. It would be futile to even try. It's hard to admit, but this whole ordeal has made me bitter towards her, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive her, but forgetting and trusting again is out of the question. She cried, and so did I, but I had to stay firm. In the end, she signed the divorce papers and sent them back to my lawyer. Now the divorce is final. I'm trying to move forward, taking it one day at a time. I'm focusing on my work, improving my skills, and keeping a close eye on my drinking, which had gotten worse during the divorce process. My mom thinks I should start meeting new people and dating again, but I'm not ready to jump back into the dating scene for now. I just need time to heal and rebuild my life on my own terms. Update to hello, everyone. I know it's been some time since my last update here. After my divorce from Brenda, there really hasn't been much to report. We completely lost touch after she moved out. She stayed with her best friend while our divorce was finalized, and that's the last I heard about her whereabouts. I decided it was best for my healing to block her on all social media platforms. As for the guy she had the affair with, my former best man, he disappeared from my life right after the wedding. The last memory I have of him is seeing him dance with Brenda at the wedding. I assumed she must have told him about the divorce, and sometimes I wondered if they ended up together. That thought bothered me for quite a while, but I've worked through those feelings of insecurity. Recently, I ran into a college friend who knew both me and the affair partner. He was actually at the wedding too. I hadn't been keeping up with anyone or even checking social media much since everything went down. This friend filled me in on some surprising news. The affair partner was cheated on and dumped by his own fiancé. It's an ironic twist, and hearing it was a strange mix of emotions. It's not something I take joy in, but it did give me a sense of closure, knowing that sometimes life has a way of balancing things out. I'm just focusing on moving forward, taking things one day at a time. That's quite the update, and it certainly adds another layer to the whole situation. It turns out a few of the groomsmen were aware of the affair between my former best man and Brenda the night before the wedding. After I locked myself in my room during the reception, they pieced together what had happened. When word of my divorce spread, it all clicked for them. My college friend who filled me in on all of this had lost touch with the affair partner after the wedding chaos. However, by a twist of fate, he ended up working at the same company as the affair partner. It was there that he learned about his recent engagement and its abrupt end. The affair partner had gotten engaged to a coworker, but just a day after the engagement, they split up and the planned wedding for this month was called off. During an office party, the affair partner, having had too much to drink, confessed to my friend that his fiancé had cheated on him, which was the reason for their breakup. It's a harsh reality and an ironic twist considering his past action. This whole saga has been a lot to process, and hearing these developments, while shocking, does bring some strange sense of poetic justice. Now more than ever, I'm focused on moving forward and leaving all this drama firmly in the past. The friend tried consoling me, saying that the affair partner was hit by karma because of what he had done to me. I said I had moved on from the feeling of revenge and betrayal when I was being cheated upon. I desperately wanted to ruin the affair partner's life. But now I just don't care about him or Brenda. Both are ghosts to me and don't exist for me to update the people who have read. I'm dating this wonderful girl from my office. She's a brave single mom of an adorable daughter, and I can't stop gushing over both of their cuteness and mannerisms. It's too early to say whether I want to marry her or not, but she definitely lives my life with her presence. Last month, I invited her over to my parents for dinner, and my parents just love her daughter. It was a happy sight, and I want to seal this deal. But we are both very skeptical and don't want to rush into things. Will probably take a couple of years more before we decide to marry, if at all. Fingers crossed, but we might start living together soon. I will make an update if anything progresses.